Hello and welcome to Cupcakes and Crafts. In this video I'll show you how I turned a chocolate orange into a fun Mother's Day treat. I used a Terry's chocolate orange. I did have to melt some chocolate and just pop that in the middle because my orange were falling apart. I've also got a small cake card, some water and a clean paintbrush. I've a rolling pin, a sharp knife, some icing sugar and a dressing tool. I have fondant in pink, yellow, flesh, orange, a little bit of black and white. Because I'm making a few of these, I did decide to use my face mould. If you don't have a mould, you can just model your own face. The first thing I'm going to do is take some of that flesh coloured fondant and push it into the face mould, and using that sharp knife I'm just going to remove the excess from the back, neaten it off and pop that into the freezer and let chill for half an hour. Then rolling out 150 grams of the white icing onto too much icing sugar. I rolled it big enough just to be able to cover the chocolate orange. Then I'm going to flip that over, remove the excess icing sugar and put a little bit of water on it and lay that over the top of the chocolate orange and gently just working that fondant all the way around to cover it underneath. If you have any excess fondant like I did, you can just remove that with the sharp knife. It doesn't have to be too neat at this point because we are going to be covering it up. And then I'm going to just try and smooth that off best I can. When I was happy the chocolate orange was covered and it was as smooth as I could possibly get it, I used a little bit of water just to attach that to the cake card. Then rolling out that white fondant long enough to ensure it would fit around the top of the chocolate orange. I'm going to keep the join at the front so I can hide where both ends will meet. Then using that water to attach it to the top part of the orange, and just using that sharp knife to cut away any excess fondant. Because I used the mould, my head is flat at the back, so I'm going to use a little bit of white fondant to prop up my face. And again, just using a little bit of water and having a little play until I'm happy with the positioning. To make the feet, I'm going to take some of that flesh tone fondant, roll it into a teardrop and flatten it to one end, and then using that tool I'm just going to insert 5 little toes. And I'm going to pop them in place just using a little bit of water. I did forget to mention at the beginning that we need some fondant for hair, so I'm just using a brown fondant and I'm rolling that into long thin strips and just with a little bit of water adding them to the head. I'm only placing these strands around the front of the face because I will be putting a towel on the back of the head, and this is when I should have put an eyebrow onto the face too. Then taking some of that pink fondant, I'm just going to roll it nice and thin. Then using that sharp knife, I'm going to cut out a long strip and just measure that up against the side of the chocolate orange to see what length I want. And on the top I am going to cut a semicircle, which I just found easier to attach to the bath, and using a little bit of water just to attach that. I'm going to use the towel to cover the join on the bathtub rim and keep it pushed up against Mum's feet. To make Mum's towel for the head, I started by rolling a cone of that pink fondant and started stretching it out with my thumb and forefinger, just rolling and pinching until I was happy with the size. And when I was happy with the fit, I just popped a little bit of water on the inside and gently pushed that onto the back of the Mum's head. Then using one of the modelling tools, I'm just going to help put some creases into that fondant just so it can fold back a little bit easier on itself and it shouldn't tear. The head is quite heavy on this one, so I did use my icing shaker just to hold it in place while it dried. For a little bit more detail, I took some of that pink fondant and rolled a long thin teardrop shape and just popped that on the front of the towel, and using that tool just tidied up anything I wasn't happy with. To make the little rubber duck, I used that yellow fondant and just measured out how much I think I would use and gently rolled it into a teardrop shape and gently manipulated the pointy part and lifted it back upon itself. For the little wings, I rolled tiny little balls of the yellow fondant, turned them into a teardrop shape and just flattened them. My yellow fondant is a little bit sticky, so I didn't need any water to attach them to the body. I did attach it to the cake card with a little bit of water, and for the head I simply rolled a ball of the yellow fondant. And when I was happy with the size, I did attach that with a little bit of water. To make the beak, I used the orange fondant and rolling a tiny little cone in my fingers and squashed that into a triangle, I just attached that to the front of the duck's face. And carefully just flattened the front of the beak. To make the eyes, I took 2 small tiny amounts of black fondant, rolled them into the tiniest little balls and just popped them onto the front. I'm going to put a few extra details on Mum's face, and I'm going to do this by using some pink lustre dust and using a dry paintbrush. Just pop this onto her cheeks, and using some edible food colour, I'm going to use a really thin paintbrush and draw in an eye line. And this thin teardrop shape is the eyebrow I should have popped on earlier when I was doing the actual hair. Just using that tool to position it until I was happy with it. And for this last bit, this is where you'll see the actual chocolate orange come together. I'm using that white fondant and just rolling lots of tiny little balls and just attaching them to the top part of the chocolate orange using some water. First I started by working my way around the edge of the tub and then up around the face, and then just filling in the rest. Where there were any gaps created on the bottom layer, I just added some extra little white bubbles of fondant onto the top to cover up the gaps. And this is what she looked like when it was finished. I did feel like something was missing, so using that same thin paintbrush, I popped a little bit of edible food colouring in red just on the ends of her feet to make it look like she was wearing nail polish. Thank you very much for watching.